Let's get into tonight's show straight away because it has been COVID chaos and meetings are happening as we speak with the Victorian government trying to sort out Victoria as a society as well as the football and the AFL who are burning the midnight oil right throughout tonight trying to work out every possible contingency at the moment. What we can tell you, and you might have seen this through the course of the day in London News, this is what we know now, and then we're going to tell you what has been breaking in the last 5 minutes. So the South Australian border closure throws the Crows' plans into disarray. Hold on to that thought. We'll come back to it, particularly for Richmond fans and for the Crows fans. There is big news. 10 Victorian clubs forced into AFL-imposed lockdown here in Victoria. Essendon and Carlton have gone. They're already in the air. In fact, they're already landed in Perth and in New South Wales and Sydney. Port Adelaide have been tested in isolation after the plane scare, getting back after the game last week against Collingwood and with their travelling party. Marvel joins MCG in recording positive COVID case. Right. This is the new news. Caroline Wilson, jump in at any stage here, but let me take you through. This is quotes from Gillan McLaughlin about 3 minutes ago. AFL working through all contingencies. This includes the possibility of moving all teams out of Victoria if necessary. Darwin, despite what you would have seen on the various news services, not that they were wrong, it's changing by the hour, is still in play for Gold Coast and Hawthorn. However, that game could be moved to Queensland. But the big story, and the one that is pressing most of all, Caroline, is Adelaide and Richmond. Adelaide won't come to Melbourne. They can't come in. Richmond can't go to Adelaide. It looks more than likely that that will be played somewhere else. That somewhere else could be the Gabba, Metricon, Giant Stadium or down to Tasmania.
Yeah, and the AFL isn't even ruling out Perth at this point, Ed, because Mark McGuire, the Premier, still hasn't closed the borders, although you would think that that is more likely than any of the other states. I think the number one choice at the moment is for the Richmond-Adelaide game to be played in Sydney and probably at Giant Stadium. I think if the AFL had their choice, they would move at least 2 Victorian clubs up to Sydney to stay for the next few weeks. But there's a facilities problem there, obviously, probably a bigger problem there than would be in Tasmania, where I don't think there are any games scheduled this weekend. So I would predict at the moment they're trying to move that game to Sunday at Giant Stadium. But Adelaide are going to bed tonight not knowing where that game is played. Ditto Richmond. The state government, the Victorian government are still meeting. And so the AFL are expecting a lockdown announcement tomorrow. They're anticipating a lockdown announcement tomorrow. You're right, they are trying to now, having postponed the Darwin game between the Gold Coast and Hawthorn, they're now trying to put that on again, but they're determined to play that game somewhere, if they can, over the weekend. And as I say, New South Wales at the moment remains a first order priority for the AFL.
So the other thing is just to put a bit of colour around that and to fill in the gaps, because you were on one phone, I was on the other. We're working the phones pretty hard there up until a couple of minutes ago. Travis Old came to the phone and told us that it's not only this round, it's the second and third and fourth weeks in this block. They've got a little bit of leeway because the buys are coming up in the next period of time. I asked him, would you change the fixture altogether? They said that is the worst case scenario. So they're going to try and stick to the fixture they've got. That doesn't mean they'll play necessarily where they're scheduled at the moment, but they want to keep the schedule of the games going. New South Wales, as you said, and Queensland are becoming very important again for the AFL. I suppose the difference this time is that last time everyone was closed down. This time, half of Australia's in Queensland anyway. They reckon that anyone who used to go to Bali's up in Port Douglas at the moment, they're already up there.
Cara, can I ask you about crowds? Can we get to that? If you were planning on going to, I know lockdown in Melbourne might be one thing, but everywhere else, did you get an answer tonight around where that sits for people going to the footy this weekend?
Well, the AFL's hopeful that there will be normal attendances as planned in the other states. And even though it's been reported there will be no crowds in Victoria this weekend, the AFL still hasn't completely confirmed that. They're waiting to hear back from the Victorian government. As we said, the dominoes have fallen well for some clubs. Collingwood were hosting Hawthorn on Friday, Geelong, I should say, on Friday night at the MCG. Well, Saturday, I should say. Okay. Sorry. But I don't think Geelong have got a home game for another 4 weeks. So this is good news financially for Geelong, who won't be losing any money really out of the next few weeks, or nothing significant compared to Collingwood. It was a very important game for them. Richmond desperate to get back to the MCG to get their season back on track. That certainly won't be happening, as you say, Ed. But as I say, I think that today the CEOs were all told in that phone hookup with Gillan McLachlan that hubs are very much back on the agenda. They are looking at hubs in New South Wales and Queensland as first choice. But Tasmania's role is intriguing.
And the Northern Territory, I reckon, is coming into play.
Well, you're right, but Tasmania is the intriguing one. Colin Carter doing that big report on behalf of the AFL, or he's the independent the AFL chose to do the report. He's been over there anyway, meeting the Premier. He's been given tours of the wonderful parts of Hobart.
Well, they'd have to change their philosophy from last year, the Tasmanian government, because their borders went up pretty quickly.
Well, the Premier's in place now. He doesn't have an election to face.
So the election's over.
And he's also trying to, get a team in Tasmania. This is a perfect opportunity for Tasmania to showcase what a wonderful place they are to host AFL football.
Ross, can I bring you in here? Right? Does this flip the season on its head? Because we saw some teams handle hubs well, some young players liked it, players despised it.
Undoubtedly. Yeah. I'm sitting here, I think we're all feeling the stress and the anxiety. It's almost overwhelming, but I think everyone in Clubland would be feeling that. So I actually wrote down who took the opportunity last year. The Saints blossomed in the hub. Port were incredible in their approach, but West Coast floundered. Richmond early floundered and then righted the ship. So I think now, on last year's experiences, the threat is be overwhelmed, or really the opportunity mentally, if you're the coach, you've got to get to your group. You start mentally prepared, as hard as that sounds. I think they've got to mentally start the shift. The administrators, the CEOs, the leaders of the clubs have got to start leading now and balancing up. And I think it's almost inevitable that we're going to end up in hubs.
Brisbane are fascinating because they had so much of their season at home last year, finished in the top four, couldn't make the grand final. This year they're the one club who've really done the hard yards already. They were marooned in Melbourne for those 3 weeks, only got one win out of those 3 weeks, one narrow loss and a bigger loss to the Western Bulldogs. They're now in the box seat, I reckon. But Ed, going back to the start of the season, let's have a listen to what you said back in February, I think it was, or March this year.
No, that's the wrong one. That's not what we want. No, we want to go to...
No, that's actually going to come up later. That's your successor.
That's my old
We're going to have a crack at it.
No, let's go back to what we said earlier this year, and have we got that rolling there?
I've been pushing, by the way, for it to start earlier. There's one thing we know about COVID is it's cold. Why wait till it gets cold? All right, get going. We've got no Grand Prix and things. March would be a good time to get started, I would have thought.
Yes.
I'm not necessarily sure I necessarily agree with that. I don't know if this has happened because it's got cold. I think this has happened because of a strain of the virus that's come from India that is highly contagious.
Look,
it seems to be appalling bad luck.
I'm not running the tracing or the hospital scene. For me, you get in when the opportunity was there. That was what I was saying at the time. It wasn't about what was coming. We do know that it is a cold climate an affliction, although we've seen it in India in recent times, so things change. But my position there was, and we spoke to this at the AFL, this is not having a crack at the AFL because until 3 days ago, everything was going all right.
They didn't finish the season until the end of October, though.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. But what I said was, instead of doing pre-season training and pre-season games, just start, have a festival of football, and we could have been at round 17 today, if that was the case, and then we could be prepared. We could bank it. Now, we could have had a 28-game season if need be, but if you've got them in the bank and you've got 17 games done, then we're home. Then we're home, and then we can add on if need be, or do whatever. We could have, whatever the case may be. I'm not having a crack. I'm not saying, I was Nostradamus and I got it right, but I'm just saying that I think tonight we would have liked to have had a few more rounds banked at this stage.
And we'll come to you with more breaking news as it happens during the show, but the CEOs met at Werribee Mansions yesterday, Ed, the 18 clubs, and Gillan McLachlan was there. Very interesting dinner on Monday night and interesting conversations yesterday, Matthew. A couple of legacies of COVID were put forward by Gillan McLachlan. It now sounds to me almost certain we will never have a fixed fixture of 23 rounds again in the AFL. I think they will be announced in 6-week blocks, and that will be ongoing for the years to come. Gillan McLachlan actually referenced his own team, St Kilda, in saying, imagine if we'd gone with St Kilda in 5 or 6 Friday nights this year. Wouldn't have been a great decision where they are now. Clubs were really disappointed that the AFL hadn't stuck with Thursday nights for the whole season. They love Thursday nights and believe the players would have put up with the 5-day breaks if they could work it out that way. And a real growing resentment against something, Ed, you've been on about for a while, which is the 7:50 starts on Friday nights, which they reckon is hurting crowds and hurting ratings.
Yeah, it is. So I think what will happen once we get through, hopefully, touch wood, get through all this COVID situation, there are a lot of learnings to take from this. And even going back to what we just played a moment ago, was my thinking was cricket is now played all over the world, all over the calendar. I know, speaking to Earl Eddings at Cricket Australia, they're looking at revamping their entire way they play cricket going forward. And I think there's an opportunity for us. I mean, we have our football season because it was in between the cricket seasons. That was basically it. Now we can actually look at it and say, well, what's the best time of year for us to play footy? What's the best weather? If we're going to play night games, would you rather be sitting, in the middle of winter somewhere, or would you like to have those night games in a nice balmy condition in March and things like that?
That's different to trying to avoid the virus, though, isn't it?
That's two different things. But what I'm saying is,
but one legacy of the virus is a new
flexibility.
fixture.
Just on that, Caro, so we've got the bye rounds coming up. You just wonder whether things change, whether the bye rounds come at the right time, or you just wonder also, Ed, we got used to playing every 3, 4, 5 days. Who knows where this competition
There's no
will go.
doubt we could go back to a rolling fixture like we did last year, and the bye rounds have given them more flexibility. If this is just something that can be eradicated with a 5-day lockdown, as has happened in other states and happened in Victoria.
And you said before you're expecting that a 5-day lockdown is coming.
Well, I don't know. It'll be 3 or 5 days, and I don't even know if that's certain, but that's what I would predict, and I'm speaking from no knowledge at all.
So I can give you a little bit of knowledge. I got inside the government today, or late tonight, and they're still meeting as we speak.
Yep.
So they're working, and the Victorian government are not necessarily worrying about the footy. That's a byproduct. They're trying to get Victoria sorted out. But that will be, tomorrow's going to be the big day as far as that's concerned, once the numbers come through. So a big go. But the bottom line is, all contingencies being looked at by the AFL. The game between Richmond and Adelaide, we think 100% basically will be moved.
Probably to New South Wales.
Probably to New South Wales.
Queensland.
So certainly Adelaide can't come to Melbourne, and Richmond won't be going to Adelaide. So that will be moved. The game up in Darwin between Gold Coast and Hawthorn. At the moment, the AFL, I think, more chance of it being there than there was at 6 o'clock tonight.
They're having talks with politicians up there at the moment.